what would you do in a crisis? How to not panic. So we are with Mad Dog today. I have been getting hours of learning the world of technology and spycraft. So there's a U-2. Do you want to describe what this U-2 spy plane is and why you know so much about it?
Yeah, so I was a Air Force pilot for 20 years, and I flew the F-15E Strike Eagle, which is a fighter jet. And I also flew the U-2 spy plane, which is a big 110-foot wingspan black glider that flies at 70,000 feet.
Whoa.
And it's one of our, it is our premier strategic spy plane.
That's amazing.
Yes, and you fly in a spacesuit.
Oh, okay. So
Yes.
why do you have to do that?
So you fly in a spacesuit so your blood doesn't boil. So
Sounds important. Probably should not let that happen.
So there's a whole pressure temperature thing, bottom line at about 60,000 feet at 98.6 degrees, water boils. So anything above that, your body, your blood would boil. So what we do in the U-2 is, in case there's a cockpit depressurization, like you would in an airliner when they brief you about the airbags coming down.
Yeah.
In case of depressurization, well, if that were to happen in a U-2 and I didn't have a spacesuit on, I would die because my blood would boil instantly.
Wow.
So they put a spacesuit on you. So if that happens, the spacesuit blows up and you keep pressure on your body so that your blood doesn't boil, and then you take the airplane home and you land.
Okay, so Brian Mad Dog Maddox.
Yes, ma'am.
What in the world got you into being in spycraft?
So I when I was about 8 years old, I wanted to be a fighter pilot. I just couldn't think of anything cooler. I'm from a small little town in New Jersey, and what could be possibly cooler than being a fighter pilot? That's what I wanted to do. So everything I did from being a kid on was to be a fighter pilot. So I ended up playing sports and doing community services and being a valedictorian at my high school, and so I could go to Fighter Pilot U, which is the Air Force Academy, graduated from there, and then became a pilot.
Wow.
And did all kinds flew a bunch of different stuff. Flew cargo planes, flew trainer aircraft. I was an instructor pilot, flew the fighter jet, and then flew the U-2 spy plane as my last airplane. But it's just what I wanted to do ever since I was a little kid.
And then a couple masters along the way. So I wish you would do something with your life.
I know.
So lazy.
I know.
You need
It's
to do
terrible.
something.
It's
Okay.
terrible.
So you were telling me this fascinating story along the lines of not panicking and
Yes.
how it saved your life.
Yes.
Can you bring us into that?
Of course. So I like the idea. There's an idea by a guy named Viktor Frankl, right?
Yep.
Who wrote Man's Search for Reason.
Meaning.
Thank you. Meaning, as a Holocaust survivor. And one of the concepts that he uses is power, your personal power really comes in decision. In the space between stimulus and response, that's the decision space, and that's your power.
Yeah.
Okay.
So let me pause you. So right now, as you're listening, I want you to think of something in your life that you need to really tighten up. What's your response? It could be with your kids. It could be in your job, in your marriage, in some area of life that you know your knee-jerk reaction keeps undermining your best performance. So think of that as he's talking so you can start making application for yourself.
Great. So as a pilot, you're highly trained for what you do. I mean, in the fighter pilot world, in the combat pilot world, we always say we strap an airplane on. We don't strap into an airplane, we strap it on. It becomes part of you, really. You have tons and tons, hours and hours and hours of training so that you know what you're going to do, not only under normal circumstances, but emergency circumstances as well, up to and including pulling the handles on an ejection seat if bad things are happening, and just taking a rocket ride.
There's some areas we wish we had an ejection seat, but keep going.
Right, yeah. Wouldn't it be nice to have an ejection seat for life every once in a while?
some
Wouldn't that just be
parenting
awesome? Yeah.
As a business owner?
So on one particular night, so the U-2, like you said, the U-2 spy plane is a high altitude spy plane. It flies at 70,000 feet. So I was on a mission over Afghanistan one night at 70,000 feet. Coming up on a turn point. The airplane flies on autopilot because the air's so thin up there. So we're coming up on a turn point. I'm keeping track of the instruments, and the airplane did something weird. It started turning before the turn point. It doesn't do that. In the airplane, the missions are usually about 10 hours long. So you're in this thing all by yourself. You're all alone, which is awesome, by the way, but
But most of the time in life, you feel all alone when the crazy moments happen in crisis.
That's actually a good analogy. It's actually a great analogy.
I just came up with that.
Good point. So anyway, I'm in the jet, watching my instruments, coming up on a turn point. A little bit early, the airplane starts to turn. I'm like, okay, that's weird. And I'm keeping an eye on it, and it keeps turning and turning and turning. Now, in a U-2 at that altitude, the airplane will only go about 10 degrees of bank because the air's so thin. Gets into a whole lift thing. But it starts turning past 10 degrees, past 15 degrees, and bad things are about to start happening like real quick.
Because this plane, and unlike Top Gun,
unlike a fighter jet, you do not go inverted.
You're not supposed to go upside down
in a spy plane. So immediately I know something's wrong. I reach up onto the control stick, and I the big red button that clicks off the autopilot. So I click off the autopilot. I turn the airplane to wings level.
Yeah.
And as I'm rolling wings level, and by the way, you can see the horizon even at night up there. So I know what level is. All of my instruments keep turning to where they're upside down. So the airplane was literally trying to turn itself upside down.
which is real bad with this 110
Which is
wingspan.
real bad at 70,000 feet. That's where the whole ejection seat thing comes in. And you don't want to do that, especially over Afghanistan where they, if you land and the bad people find you, they'll chop your head
Real
off.
bad. Real bad.
Yeah, so you don't want to do that. That's not good.
So let me pause you. So the parallel for your life might be like, it's kind of going bad and you're like, I've been on autopilot, life's been okay, and then a little bit of bad, but then it's getting worse. And you're like, is someone literally sabotaging me? Why do the bad things keep happening in a row? And we can panic and get offended and upset about the circumstance instead of stay with the end goal. So keep going.
Right. No, so great analysis. So what do I do in that moment? If I'd have panicked, I'd have been dead. Oh my God, what do I do? Well, I knew what to do because I had been trained for it. And I had played these scenarios over and over in my mind.
Yeah.
I click off the autopilot, I roll wings level, and I pause, just like we talked about. Okay, what's going on? What do I do? Let's just think for a minute.
Yeah.
Right? Because nothing bad's happening. The airplane's not crashing. The airplane's fine. Now what do I do? Right? And so from there, I know the airplane's, something's going on with the airplane, with the navigation system. My attitude indicator is upside down. My heading indicator is 180 degrees off. And what I did was I went back to my fundamental training. So at this point, I had been flying for about 15 years. Okay. And one of the first things you learn is what's called dead reckoning, right? Which means I have point A and I have point B. And if I look at a map, I know what my heading is between point A and point B. I know how far it is between point A and point B. And if I know how fast I'm going, I know how much time it takes me to get from point A to point B. It's just like driving a car.
Yeah.
Okay. So fundamentals, right? I call back to my people, to my wingman who was on the ground.
So you get support from your healthy team. Okay. I'm tracking.
There you go. You get support from the team. So I call back to my wingman. I'm like, hey, I need heading and timing, right? Direction and time from Kandahar to our exit point out of Afghanistan. So little context there.
So that could be mentors, that could be friends, that could be community, that could be therapy. Crawford Clinics is always available for you. It could be executive coaching. Right. So there's lots of ways that we can lean in when we're in a crisis. You want to panic, but instead your life is not actually crashing right now, but it could if you stay in panic mode instead of what he's going to describe next.
Absolutely. So what I did was, stopped, made a plan, paused. I got heading and timing from, like I described that DR thing, the dead reckoning. In Afghanistan at night, there are exactly two lights. One is Kandahar, the other one's Bagram. I mean, it's desolate.
Yeah, total desert.
Think about flying over the U.S. and there's lights everywhere and you don't know what's what.
Landmark.
Where am I? Yeah. You know exactly where you are in Afghanistan because there's only two. There's only two. So I head for Kandahar. I'm flying a jet at 70,000 feet to Kandahar, completely on visual. Right. And the way the environment worked, you've got Afghanistan, you got Pakistan, and to the west, you have Iran.
So lots of friendly places.
Yeah, right,
they love your head being attached to your body.
So the other thing you don't want to do is fly a $50 million spy plane into Iran.
That's probably a good idea in life choices. Yeah.
So that's the other thing you don't want to do.
Okay, good.
So, I get to Kandahar. I got to get to our exit point. So our exit point, there's an air corridor, safe airspace to get through Pakistan and back home. We were stationed in the United Arab Emirates at the So my wingman calls back to me. He said, hey, fly 210 for 30 minutes. I'm making this up.
Okay.
Fly heading 210 for 30 minutes. Okay, roger that. 210, 30 minutes. I get to Kandahar. I turn 210 on a compass. Not all these Gucci instruments. Like when you go get on an airplane, you look in the cockpit, and you see all these,
high-tech.
flat panel. I had none of that. All that was gone.
Yes.
I have it. It's there.
Yeah.
None of it worked.
Yeah.
So I've got literally a magnetic compass and literally like a push mechanical winded up clock.
So when everything has been stripped and all the things you normally rely on and they're not there, that is a normal place that we could panic or
rely on your training.
exactly. Which
your
means
mindset.
we need to be training.
Right. You need to be thinking. You need to be preparing.
Yeah.
All the time. You prepare your mind just like you prepare your body with exercise, right?
Yeah.
So get to Kandahar, turn 210, hack the clock. 30 minutes, I turn south because this is where I'm supposed to be. And there's no lines on the ground, right? You can't look down and go, oh yeah, there's Iran over there. It doesn't work that way.
Yeah.
It's just black. Now it's 3:30 in the morning.
Yeah.
Okay. So I hit where the exit point is supposed to be based on my heading and my timing. I turned south. So once I got out of Afghanistan, all my equipment started waking up again. Okay, so I was being jammed. What'd you say? Hacked.
Hacked.
So there was something walking all
There was
this off.
nefarious things that were really affecting. So that may be happening. You may have saboteurs and people in your life that are actually working against you, talking behind your back. And it's natural to want to focus on that. But if he focused on trying to figure out the hacking, he would not have been focusing on his destination. So I think that's key in life. There are people that will probably work against you in life. There are situations and events that suck. And if you focus there, you will lose your bearings and you'll lose the trajectory of where you want to go. Those people, prune them out of your life, keep going, because when you get to your end destination, you get to celebrate and have the life you want. Keep going.
And I'll even say to that, they might not even be mean to.
Sure.
It might just be they're just
Conscious.
acting in their own best interest and
Yeah, that's good.
and nothing to do with you. They're not trying to sabotage you. It's just or get in your way. It's just they're just doing their thing. So at any rate, so I get out of Afghanistan into Pakistan, and everything starts waking up again. Get out of the jamming environment or whatever. And no kid, I'm about 2 miles off a center line from where I was supposed to be. So all that worked. I was right exactly smack dab where I was supposed to be.
Wow.
Just based on the fundamentals, the fundamental training.
That's so good. So in our lives, what do you think as civilians that we translate that? So you're an executive coach or you're a leadership coach.
Yeah.
And you're a speaker, communicator. You go into corporations, you help people figure this out. How do we translate preparation and mindset work ahead of time?
Learning. Exposing yourself to as many situations, as much learning as you can, and challenging yourself. I mean, I'll even just put yourself in situations in your church group, in your community. Put yourself out there, and it's okay to fail. I think one of the things we all got to get over is the stigma against failing. If you're not over G'ing every once in a while, you're not pulling hard enough. What that means is, most people, a lot of people have heard this. So in a fighter jet, you pull 9G. 9Gs is the max.
Okay.
But every once in a while, you'll go more than 9Gs. You don't mean to, you just do. But what you don't want to do is train to 8.5. You want to get to 9, but you might over G every once in a while. So if you're not max performing, if you're not pulling hard enough, you're not trying to get to that max, you're never going to get there. You're not trained to get there. But every once in a while, you're going to overshoot it. You're going to fail.
Yeah.
It's going to happen. So if you're not failing every once in a while, you're not challenging yourself enough.
I heard that my whole life. My dad and brother, they would try to teach me sports or snowboarding or water skiing, whatever it was. And they're like, if you're not falling, you're not getting better.
Right.
So if there's not failure involved, you're not pushing yourself.
You're not pushing. And so backing up from that, kind of what you were asking before, you have to have courage to do that, right? You have to be okay with yourself. You have to be mentally tough. You have to be resilient that, you're going to fail. And you know what? People might make fun of you. So what? They're not trying. They're sitting on the couch.
Exactly.
I'm the one out there making things happen. You want to make fun of me? You're the one sitting on the couch or playing video games in your mom's basement or whatever. I'm out there making things happen. You're going to fail every once in a while. You're going to maybe look stupid every once in a while, but that's okay.
Absolutely.
That's okay. That's what and that's how you build that resilience, and that's how you learn.
Absolutely. And I think the more that AI takes over and we get lazy of actually critical reasoning and thinking, then this is a time more than ever to discipline yourself to turn AI off. I'm not against AI. There's moments where we use it as our business, but there's definitely times that you need to engage your critical reasoning and thinking skills, because if not, your brain goes, oh, externally, I'm supposed to get the answer from the outside. And that puts you in a very compromised position, because then whether it's social media or the news or whoever we're supposed to get that information from, it is very leaning and biased, and you won't engage your prefrontal cortex, which is smart brain, so that you make the decision that's best for your life. So if you're in marriage or if you're in business or you're in a leadership space, wherever you are, then you plan ahead, you prepare, you go to therapy, you work on yourself, you go to college, you do continuing education, you go to marriage enrichment courses, you do the due diligence ahead of time so that when crisis happens, not if, when crisis happens, you prepare for it. I love the boot camp analogy that you guys go through tons of training for all the bad things, preparing for all of those. So then it's second nature. You've already done the diligence ahead of time.
You've already thought through it.
Yeah. Okay. So you're in this moment. Normal people would crisis. Normal people would crisis. That's good grammar, Shannon.
There you go.
Okay. So normal people would panic in a crisis. And as application. So we've talked about a little bit about mindset, a little bit about preparation, some resilience.
Yeah.
What else would be some takeaways as they're leaving this session?
So I think, how do you do that, right? How do you make that happen? I just said, well, you go out there and challenge yourself.
Yeah.
And there's a technique or a moniker that we use in the military, and it applies to all of this. It's called the UDA Loop. Okay, so the UDA Loop is observe, orient, decide, act. And it's just a way of thinking about thinking. It's a model of thinking about thinking.
Yeah. Which we call meta process, but keep going.
Okay. Now I learned something. So how are you learning, right? So the second O in UDA, the orient, that's your mental models, right?
Yeah.
That's what you have in your head. Your how does the world work? How do people work? You know, if somebody's talking over there in the corner, are they talking about me? You know, these are all part of your mental models and how the world works. That's the orient phase of UDA. O prior to that is observe. So as you're observing the world, how you can and should be asking yourself questions about that, and how does that fit into my mental model? And that's kind of the passive observation. Then we get into the putting yourself out there part.
Do it. Yeah.
Which is the DA, decide, act. So I'm going to make a decision, I'm going to act on it, but then I should be observing the consequences of that. What happened?
Yeah.
You know, don't just assume that what you did was right.
Right.
You got to, if that upset somebody, well, that's feedback. I mean, I need to put that into my orientation, my mental model. What, you know, I didn't mean to upset that person. What did I do wrong? Maybe go talk to that person and, hey, what happened here? I certainly didn't mean for this to go sideways. So you're always, and being conscious of this, and I'd love to hear what the right psychological word is for this, but questioning your own thinking, questioning your own mental models, and seeking that
confirmation bias,
seeking that feedback, and with the idea that I want to learn, I want to get better, I could be wrong.
Right.
How do I make my mental models match reality? Because the end lesson here is the more closely your mental models match reality, the more effective you're going to be.
That's so
period.
Good.
Dot.
Absolutely. So I think that could be a whole episode in itself of just starting to learn to think, how am I thinking about it? So it's called your observing ego. It's the me that watches me. Like, am I talking really loud? Am I putting my foot in my mouth? Like, it's the you that observes you. And so if we don't understand that we have an observing ego and that we're constantly giving ourselves feedback, and if you don't realize it's not objective, it is 100% your mindset, your perception, observing you. So when you're like, oh my gosh, they don't even like me, I'm not even gonna go to that event, or why do I even put myself out there? Nothing ever works out for me. Whatever the belief is, you come into that preset. So there's filters you already have, and that's influencing your ability to engage with the world. So I think with your model, it's really important for people to check their version of reality against objective reality. I wanna make sure that we jump to our next episode.
Okay.
So stay tuned. Next week, we will have him back and we're going to talk about team leadership, how to go from normal, which kind of like the world's not so great at like bloated organization and leadership, but how do we optimize our leadership and create teams and cultures that influence at a maximum level. I'll see you next time. Bye, guys.